At my own company's anniversary dinner, my son raised his hand and slapped me across the face. I stood there. I looked at him. He slapped me again. 300 people went silent. I mean that literally, not the awkward quiet that happens when something uncomfortable occurs, but the absolute dropped fork silence of a room that has just witnessed something it cannot believe. My son's hand at my cheek. His face flushed. His eyes telling me to stay back. And around us, 280 employees, clients, and industry contacts who had come to celebrate 28 years of what I had built, all of them watching. I looked at my son for 3 seconds. Then I turned, walked to the exit, and drove home. I want you to understand what I left on the table when I walked out of that room. Not emotionally, we'll get to that. Legally, structurally. I want you to understand, before anything else, the specific thing my son did not know when he raised his hand in front of 300 people. He had 25% of the company. I had 75. My name is Paul Keating. I'm 58 years old. I founded Keating Security Solutions 28 years ago. We design, install, and maintain commercial security systems, access control, surveillance, alarm monitoring, the full suite for hospitals, office complexes, school districts, government facilities. 28 years. 160 employees. A name in this industry that I earned one installation at a time, one client relationship at a time, one Saturday call out in the rain at a time for 28 years. The company started at 30 with a borrowed van and a commercial electrician's license and a single tool bag. No family money. No investors, no safety net beyond my wife, Carol, working 2 jobs for 3 years while the business found its footing. My father-in-law lent me $12,000 at no interest because he believed in Carol's judgment and by extension in mine, and I paid him back in the 2nd year, and he told me he never doubted I would. The kind of trust, given before you've earned it, is the most expensive thing anyone ever gives you. You spend the rest of your career trying to justify it. 28 years. And the one rule I kept from the first day to the last. Never send an invoice for work I hadn't done right. It sounds simple. It isn't. It's the thing most of my competitors cut corners on eventually, and it's why clients call me back. That rule is why Keating Security Solutions still existed 28 years later. Not technology, not marketing, not Liam's growth projections. That rule and the reputation it built, one job at a time, over 28 years. I tell you about the business first because the business is the whole story. My son Liam had been running it as CEO for 4 years. In those 4 years, he had done a decent job by most visible measures. Revenue grew modestly, staff turnover was manageable, clients generally stayed. He gave a good speech, handled himself well in client meetings, looked and sounded like a CEO. Looking and sounding like a CEO is its own form of competence and should not be confused with a deeper kind, but is a real skill, and Liam had it. What Liam had never done in 4 years of running Keating Security Solutions was look at the ownership documents. He had 25%. A stake I'd transferred to him as a bonus when he took the CEO role, a gesture of good faith, a signal of my intention to bring him fully in over time. The other 75% was mine. Outright, undivided, documented, never restructured. The company he was treating as his was 3/4 someone else's. The building we operated from, owned by a holding company I controlled entirely. The 2 largest client contracts in our portfolio, Westbrook Hospital Network and the Regional School District Consortium, together representing over 1/3 of annual revenue, both held through personal relationships that ran through me specifically. Those clients called my cell when something went wrong. They had for 15 years. They were not going to transfer automatically to a new management team without my explicit involvement in the handoff. He had 25% of the company. I had 75, and he had just slapped me across the face in front of 300 of our clients, staff, and industry contacts in a building I owned at a party celebrating a company whose name was mine. Before I tell you what the next 90 days looked like, do me one small kindness. If you have ever built something from nothing and been made to feel like a stranger inside it, tap subscribe. It's free, and it tells me this story found the right person. And stay to the end, because I'm going to ask you the question I've been sitting with for months, and I want to hear how you'd have answered it. Let me tell you about Liam, because fairness requires it. Liam is my eldest son. He grew up watching me build this business, literally watching from the back seat of my service van on weekends when he was a kid, because I didn't always have childcare and I didn't stop working. He has my stubbornness and his mother's instinct for people, which is a good combination in this industry. When I offered him the CEO role 4 years ago, I believed I was handing the company to someone who understood what it had cost to build it. Someone who'd ridden in the back seat. Someone who knew. I want to be honest about where the wrong started. It started with me. I handed him the role without a proper handoff structure, without clear boundaries around what was mine to decide and what was his, without explicit conversations about ownership versus authority, without the documentation that turns a family understanding into a legal reality that both parties have signed and agreed to. I assumed the shared history was enough. It wasn't. What Liam heard when I gave him the CEO title was not, "I trust you to run this." What he heard, what he began to act on immediately and consistently, was, "This is yours now." And over 4 years, he'd made himself at home. The gradual disappearance of my name from my own company's narrative. I watched it happen, and I told myself it was natural. A new CEO establishes his own voice. The fact that I was being introduced at industry events as Liam Keating's father rather than as the founder. I told myself it was generational, that young executives need room to build their own credibility. The meetings I stopped being invited to, the decisions that stopped being run past me, the company story that quietly rewrote itself so that Liam appeared to have built something rather than inherited something. I said patience. I said trust. I said the company's success matters more than my name in the story. For years of patience, and he slapped me across the face at a company dinner. Twice. Let me tell you how the dinner happened, because the setup matters for understanding what came after. The 28th anniversary was Liam's idea. He organized it completely. Venue, guest list, program, awards, seating plan. A large event at a hotel ballroom. The kind of evening that projects confidence to clients and signals to staff that the company is going somewhere. He asked me, about a month before, whether I wanted to say something at the dinner. I said yes. I had a few things I wanted to say to the long-term clients. People who had trusted Keating Security Solutions for 15 and 20 years. Clients who had taken a call from a one-van operation and given us our first real contracts. I wanted to thank them in public. I told Liam, 5 minutes, maybe less. He said he'd make sure there was time. The evening came. I sat at a table with Carol, not on the stage, not on the program, a guest at my own company's anniversary dinner. A placard with my name on it and no title beneath because nobody had filled it in. I watched Liam give a speech about vision and growth and the future of the company that mentioned his name approximately 30 times. He did not mention mine once. When Liam moved into his closing remarks, I stood up. I was calm, not the hot kind, not the impulsive kind. I stood up because I had something to say, because I had told Liam I would say it, and because 28 years of building something earns you 5 minutes at the microphone. I walked toward the front. Liam stepped in front of me. He was close, too close, and his voice was low and tight. "Sit down. You're not on the program." I said quietly, "I'd built this company." "Move aside." His hand came up and connected with my face. Not a push, not a shove, a slap. Unmistakable, deliberate. The sharp sound of it in a quiet ballroom carries differently than in a noisy room. The ballroom was not noisy. 300 people heard it. The room held its breath. I looked at him. His face was flushed, and something in his expression was past the point of calculation. He'd gone somewhere he hadn't planned to go, and he wasn't pulling back. He said, "Louder now, loud enough for the front tables and beyond. Get lost, old man. You're embarrassing yourself." And then he raised his hand a second time. The second slap was harder than the first. I stood in the absolute silence of 300 people who were not breathing, and I looked at my son, and I thought exactly one clear thought. There it is. Not rage, not grief, just the cold, crystalline recognition that a question I had been avoiding for 4 years had just answered itself irrevocably. In public, with witnesses, in a room full of people whose opinion of this company I had spent 28 years carefully building. I turned and walked out. Not to my table. Out of the building. My wife caught up with me in the parking lot. She had left everything at the table. Her bag, her jacket, her phone. She put her hand on my arm, and I said, "I'm all right." She said, "I know you are." And we drove home in the kind of silence that exists between two people who have been married for 31 years and don't need to fill every moment with words. She didn't ask what I was going to do. She already knew the shape of me well enough to know that the decision had been made in the moment I walked out the door, and that what came next was execution, not deliberation. She was right. The decision had been made. If you're still with me, tap subscribe before I tell you what I did next, because this is where it matters. Monday morning, I called Grace. And the following weeks, I have already described. The records, Jerome, the departed clients, the diagnostic. Then the call to Vincent Park. Then the acquisition process. Then 89 days after the dinner, the closing documents. What I haven't told you is what happened after I signed. Carol and I went out that evening. Nothing elaborate. The Thai restaurant we'd been going to since we had no money and no company and no plan beyond the next job. She ordered for both of us without asking because she knows what I want, which is one of the 10,000 small privileges of a 31-year marriage that I have never once taken for granted. We talked about Jerome, who I'd reached out to about a consulting role. We talked about Westbrook and the transition plan. At some point I said, "I keep thinking about the van." She smiled. She knew exactly which van. The first one. The van I drove for 6 years before I could afford the second one. That had 180,000 miles on it when I retired it. That had my name on the door in vinyl letters I'd put there myself because I couldn't afford professional lettering yet. Liam was 4 when I got that van. He used to help me carry equipment on Saturday calls. Very seriously, very importantly, picking up the lightest cable reel available and carrying it like it was the most significant load anyone had ever transported. He wanted to be part of what I was doing. I don't know where that boy went. I don't know at what point between 4 years old with a cable reel and 32 years old at Podium, the wanting to be part of it became the needing to be the only part of it, became the willingness to rewrite the story so there was no founder in it, became a raised hand in a hotel ballroom in front of 300 people. I think about it. I don't have a clean answer. I suspect there isn't one. What I have instead is the van. The first job. The first client who called his neighbor. The morning I moved into the office with our name on the door in professional lettering, and I stood outside for 10 minutes before going in because I wanted to hold the moment before it became the past. That is all still mine. No acquisition document takes that. No credential transfer. No CEO title. No slap in front of witnesses changes who built what. The authentication of what was actually built here runs through me. It always did. The system always knew. Liam is my son. That is a fact that does not change based on what a person does at a microphone on a Thursday evening in a hotel ballroom. But it also does not resolve automatically, and I am not going to pretend it has resolved when it hasn't. We have not spoken since the acquisition closed. I don't know what the first conversation looks like. I'm not sure either of us does. That door is not closed. It is also not open. It is the specific kind of door that needs the right key and neither of us has found it yet. I'm not writing him off. I'm also not pretending we are fine. We are the specific kind of not fine that takes time and honesty and a willingness from both people to sit with something uncomfortable long enough to find out what's underneath it. That work is still ahead of us. I spent 28 years in access control, and I'll leave you with the one thing this work has taught me that turns out to be true about everything. Every system has an authorization level, not a credential level. Those can be faked, borrowed, inflated, presented as something they're not. The authorization level, what the person actually has the right to access, the right to decide, the right to do. In a well-designed system, those two things align perfectly. In a poorly designed one, the credential and the authorization diverge, and the system runs normally for as long as it takes for someone to reach a door the credential isn't actually authorized to open. Liam had a 25% credential. He'd been presenting it as 100% for 4 years. The system, the day-to-day running of the company, the staff, the clients, the industry relationships, had let him through because the system only checks what's presented. Nobody had run the authentication check against the underlying authorization, including me. That design flaw belongs to me. Every credentialing system has a moment of reckoning. Usually it's small, a door that shouldn't open, a file that can't be accessed, a building that doesn't recognize the card. Sometimes it's large. The reckoning for Liam's credential came in a hotel ballroom, in front of 300 people, when he raised his hand to his father and the underlying authorization became the only thing that mattered. Not the title, not the 4 years, not the speeches or the growth projections or the name he'd been building on top of mine. The authorization, 75%, documented, irrefutable, running through the man he'd just put his hand across. That was the credential the system recognized. That was the one that opened the door. The access control always knows. You just have to ask it. He presented a 25% credential as though it were 100. For 4 years, it worked. Then the authentication check ran. And the system, as systems do, recognized exactly what was actually authorized and exactly what wasn't. He had 25%. I had 75. The system always knew. Nobody asked it until it mattered. So here's my question, and I genuinely mean it because I think about it every time I drive past the building that used to say Keating Security Solutions on the door. Liam struck me twice in public, in front of clients and staff and people who'd known me for 20 years. I moved immediately, legally, decisively. I did not offer him a conversation first. I did not give him the chance to apologize or account for himself before I picked up the phone and started the process that ended his career at the company. Some people would say a father owes a son that conversation, no matter what the son has done. Some people would say what he did forfeited the right to advance notice. I made my choice, but the question stays with me. Did I owe him the conversation first before I acted? Tell me down in the comments. I genuinely want to know how you see it. If this story meant something to you, do me that kindness, subscribe, hit like, and the next time you see someone performing authority they don't actually have, someone who is presenting a credential that doesn't match their authorization, remember, the system eventually runs the check. It always does. You just have to know to ask it. And the next time the quiet person in the room, the one whose name has been disappearing from a story, the one who hasn't been on the program in a while, check what they're actually authorized to do. It's almost never nothing. And it's almost never what the person at the microphone wants you to think. I'll see you next time. And tell me something in the comments. What would you have done differently? I want to know. And if you've built something from nothing and someone has been slowly erasing your name from it, don't wait for the dinner. Run the authentication check now, while you still have options before a hotel ballroom does it for you. A note before you go. This story is a work of fiction written and dramatized for entertainment. The names, characters, and events are invented, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. But if its lesson stayed with you, that what someone presents and what they're actually authorized to do are two different things, and that every system eventually runs the authentication check, then it did its job. Take care of each other. We'll see you in the next one.